So, do you have a rebuttal? Hey, Alex, do you have a problem with anything that I said?
Well, one
Can you
thought I
see?
had was, I do believe that currently, I do believe homosexuality is natural. What I mean by that is that, it's natural for all of us to sin. We all have inherited depravity. So that's one thing I've always, been cautious about, to say it's unnatural. Because I think it would be safer to say it is natural, because sin is natural. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's just one thing I was thinking about.
So
I don't know
we're
if I-
naturally
I don't know if
depraved.
I disagree with that.
Yeah. You're not denying that it's sin, you're just
Right.
saying that it's...
Right.
Well, but what about genetics? Do you think it's genetic? Do you think it's...
I don't know. It could be, because I know people who, have parents and grandparents who struggle with alcohol, and so maybe that was passed on genetically to them. They've never had a drink in their life, but they have that temptation. I mean, I don't know if that's genetic or not, but it might be. I don't know.
Any other responses?
I like how someone's sexuality can define their entire moral compass, and that if I were to go out and have sex with all kinds of women and, claim it's because I'm a heterosexual male who just, wants to spread the love around, I just want to love as many people as I can, this is the way I do it, that gets looked at as a negative. But then when somebody else wants to do that with with people of the same gender, it's like, oh, you're just expressing yourself. Like, oh, you're just expressing, what's inside here, And the other thing is within the homosexual community, there's a lot of drug use, specifically with crystal meth. The addiction and usage rates are incredibly high, and it's because it helps remove inhibitions, and the more you do crystal meth, the more you're willing to do as a homosexual. I saw a documentary on it, and there were 6 or 7 men testifying. Like, they were all homosexual men, I think at least 2 of them had AIDS, and they were all either current crystal meth addicts or recovering crystal meth addicts, and they were like, if anybody who's gay in the homosexual community, active in the homosexual community, and they're saying they're not using crystal meth, they're lying, because everybody's doing crystal meth. And you do it because it helps you just keep going. Like, you're not, I don't know, like, that's, if you can explain to me, how to be gay without guilt and without sacrificing these other areas of your life, if you can be a normal, functional human being, maybe you have an argument, maybe you can establish some kind of case with me. But as far as I know, it's very difficult for a homosexual male to be active in that lifestyle for very long without some very serious consequences, either personally, health-wise, or other.
Yeah, well, we bring up the health issue. Obviously, you don't have a basis scripturally regardless, but, yeah, interesting. Anybody else have a response to any of this? Did you think of any response to any of this?
Well, you can say that something's natural, but that's not really what natural is meant to be. Natural is meant to be what you're supposed to do, not what you have an inclination to do. So, I may have an inclination to steal, but that's not supposed to be natural in the sense that that's not what I'm supposed to do, and that's what natural law, that's what it means by saying natural law, but it's not natural.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me go point by point back to each of those things I brought up. Okay. Okay, so this is arguments against homosexuality, responding specifically to those things that I said in favor of homosexuality. So now let's go to the arguments against homosexuality, responding point by point to the arguments for homosexuality. Okay, so first thing is if you look at Genesis 19 and you look at Jude 7, you will see that it is homosexuality that was primarily the sin of Sodom. Not that they could have other problems. I'm sure they had other problems as well, but they certainly had a problem with homosexuality. B, homosexual sins are contrary to nature. It's not true that Romans 1 teaches that heterosexuality is unnatural for homosexuals. Romans 1 talks of men committing indecent acts with other men. Okay? It's obvious that we're talking about some homosexual activity. See, David and Jonathan were not homosexual. You know, at the very least, you have to say that they would at the least be bisexual, right? Because, you know, he really was attracted to Bathsheba. David's attraction to Bathsheba. Okay, but Jonathan and David's love wasn't sexual, it was friendship. They had a very strong friendship. There's no indication that there's anything sexual involved here. Jonathan stripped of his royal robe and armor, not all of his clothes, and kissing was a common custom. You know, you probably don't need to think about a kind of kiss that lovers do when you think about the kissing of you know, the ancient Israelites. Yeah.
Hypothetically speaking, if they were homosexual, wouldn't that still only be descriptive rather than prescriptive?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, just like with polygamy, I mean, yeah, there's lots of polygamy in the Old Testament, but that doesn't mean that God sanctioned it. But no, there's no evidence here that David and Jonathan were homosexual. D, mutual adult consent does not make it right. It is not true that consenting adults should have no sexual constraints. God still condemns it, even if it is consensual. And two adults can consent to do what is evil. Right? I mean, Rich and I can consent to go rob a bank together. Not that we'd be successful, but we could try to do it. It'd still be evil. We could help each other commit suicide. That'd still be wrong. Right? E, the right to privacy is not the right to immorality. It is not true that the right to privacy protects homosexuality. Our right to privacy does not extend to immoral activity. In changing the location of an immoral act, like say in your bedroom, you know, does not change its wrongness. And by the way, I wish they would keep it in their bedroom. You see the public displays of some of this stuff they do. Yeah, homosexual orientation is not inherited. Now, we can talk about tendencies, that's different. I'm talking about actual orientation. There's no undisputed scientific evidence to show that homosexual tendencies are inherited. Okay, so even the tendencies are not, there's no undisputed evidence to show that they're inherited. My point is, sexuality is a learned behavior. You might have some characteristics that you were born with that makes it more likely that you'll end up being like that, acting like that, having those feelings. And so in that sense, you could say that you can be born with an orientation, but that's kind of missing the point. Even if there is an inherited inclination, that would not justify homosexual activity any more than a tendency toward alcohol abuse that Alex referred to here, would justify drunkenness. Just because you have a certain inclination doesn't mean you need to act on it. All of us are born sinners. All of us have certain tendencies, characteristics that maybe cause us to be more inclined or influence us to be more inclined in one direction or another as far as the sins that we might commit. But that does not justify acting out something that is actually unbiblical. We all have a tendency for sinning, but we have the responsibility to overcome our sinfulness by the grace of God. Okay, so let's just spend a little more time on this. Is it possible that certain people, the kinds of maybe hormones that they have, the physical characteristics that they have, put them more at risk for this? Would you all agree with that? I mean, we could talk about some kids being naturally more effeminate, and then what happens in that case? Maybe rejected by the guys, and then there's this love-hate relationship. Jerry talked about this the other day, didn't he? And somehow you feel estranged from the boys, and you feel like, boy, I wish I could connect with them, but then you connect with them in an appropriate way. So it's really a perversion. It's you could say a problem. There's a psychological unhealthiness here.